So joining me now, very excited to say it's the Cat in the Hat, otherwise known as his real name, which is Simon Mason. How you doing, Simon?
I'm fine, James. Thank you
Good.
very much.
Does anyone still call you the Cat in the Hat, or is the Cat in the Hat long gone?
Oh, he retired. He retired a very long time ago. Interestingly, bizarrely enough, a couple of days ago, I was actually in Manchester at a ride show, and I bumped into someone that I haven't seen since my visit to Nedworth in '96. I say visit because I didn't stay.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "Where's your hat?" I'm like, "I haven't worn that hat for 20 years, Coatsy." And then he went, "Yeah, you look like a fucking knob in it anyway."
Have you still got the hat?
No, my fuck, no.
That's the sort of thing that would be in a museum somewhere.
Yeah, it would be in a very sort of dusty corner of a museum that no one ever went into, I'm sure. Yeah.
Cool. No, well, nice one, mate. Well, just to say, I mean, the obviously the big spur for you coming on. This is the Oasis podcast, and your book, and which obviously chronicles that sort of period of your life. You had quite a bit to do with. Well, shall we call them the Manchester City Frisbee team, or should we call them Oasis?
You can call them whatever you like.
All right, we'll call them Blur then.
Don't do that.
So that was.
So you ran through the lawyer now, so definitely don't call them Blur.
All right. But I was just going to say. So the first thing, really, though, is what you're up to at the moment, and I've really been enjoying the album Hightown Pirates. I mean, you just want to tell us about that, mate?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying it as well. So Hightown Pirates, we're kind of a collective, really, I suppose. It's a project that came about as a result of. I'll start at the beginning. I don't want to ramble on forever because I have a tendency to do that. So I hadn't played any of my own songs or been involved in any sort of new music for a very, very long time. I mean, just to sort of contextualise what I'm going to say next and people who are listening, I stopped taking drugs and alcohol in 2006 after a sort of 20 years plus of doing all that sort of stuff, which, as you already said, is pretty well documented in my book, Too High, Too Far, Too Soon. I was 36 years old at that point. I'd spent 20 plus years making a bit of a tit of myself, and I would say if there was a gold medal for snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, I'd have won loads of them.
Yeah.
I had lots of opportunities through the various lifestyle choices that I'd made over the years. I'd always wanted to be in a band. I'd been in a few back in the 90s, but the equation, sex, drugs and rock and roll, I kind of got it completely wrong. It was just drugs and the rock and roll, and everything else never really happened. So when I got clean in 2006, I had absolutely no idea how to live life without being absolutely fucking spannered all the time, because I'd never done it.
Mm.
And I found myself with a sort of, well, what do I do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And the only thing I concerned myself with was learning how to live life clean and sober.
Yeah.
For a year. That's all I kind of did. I went to a lot of 12-step meetings and met other people that had a similar trajectory and were doing similar things. And I then kind of went and worked in sort of statutory drug treatment facilities for 5 or 6 years. That's a fairly well-trodden path. I figured I kind of know what I'm talking about, which isn't necessarily true, I have to say. But I became a parent. My daughter Tabitha is now 9, and my marriage broke down, and life, just stuff that we do, right? Just life that everybody else had been doing for a very long time, but I hadn't. And I wrote the book, and the book was published in 2013, and I was still working in a drug treatment centre at that point, and I took a bit of a leap of faith. I'd kind of had enough of doing that. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to try and continue what I've been getting paid to do, i.e., support people and try and encourage people to improve their lives by, you know, not being drug addicts anymore. By writing the book, and hopefully that might sort of lead other places. You know, it might give me a different sort of, you know. And that's what happened, because what actually happened next was that I was approached by a couple of managers of some artists, and I'm not in a position to say who they are, who had very long and in some cases well-documented problems with drugs and alcohol, and these people approached me and said, "Can you help our friend?"
Okay.
And so I went back into the music business as the polar opposite of what I loosely used to do. So if there's a better example of poacher turned gamekeeper, I'd like to hear it, you know. So that's what I did, you know, 4 years ago. So I started working with artists that were either clean and sober or trying to get clean and sober within the music industry. And one of those people who I can talk about a little bit was a guy called Mick Head, formerly of Shack and the Pale Fountains. One of Noel's and Liam's favourite songwriters of all time, has to be said. They know each other well.
Yeah.
Pete Townsend is a massive fan. I'm a ridiculously massive Shack Mick Head fan.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the NME called him our greatest living songwriter. I agree.
Yeah.
Sorry, Noel. and Mick had not been doing so great, let's put it like that. And we built a friendship, and he came to stay with me for a while, a couple of summers ago. And my guitar was sat in the corner of my room, pretty much gathering dust like it had done for a few years. And he just said to me one day, he said, "Why don't you play your guitar more often?" I'm like, "'Cause he said, "Pick up your fucking guitar there, mate." So you've got a songwriting genius in my front room telling me to start playing guitar again. You can't really say no.
No.
And so with Mick's encouragement, that's what I started doing. And we've got a gig organised for Mick down here in London. Before you went back to Liverpool, I said, you know, you've got to do a gig and you've got to do it sober, because that's what you're on this planet to do. You're a musician and you need to just learn how to do this. So he said, well, if I'm doing a gig, you're going to be the opening act. Which for me was kind of, sort of, had I been drinking a cup of tea, I'd have spat it out at the time. But that's what happened. We did a show almost 2 years ago to the day as we speak down here in Stutney in London, and I opened the show for Mick and I played 5 or 6 songs, and then he came out and played his first ever sober show, and it was remarkable and amazing and magical, and we had a little invited audience of 100 people, previous managers, family, friends, and it was in a church which they use for live music down here. And it was one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in my life. And the upshot of that was that night he came back to mine, and my daughter was staying with me that night. And but I just put a record. She watched my set, and when Mick came on, she went and started playing outside in the cemetery with her mate. Anyway, she said, "Daddy, I can't sleep. And Mick grabbed my guitar. And he played her a couple of his songs and played them to me, and we're just sitting there, and she fell asleep, and I was crying, and he was crying, and he said, "That's why we play music." And I went, man. You know what? You're right. So I told you I could talk, and I get started.
That's great. Keep going. This is podcast gold.
So it kind of made sense. The penny dropped again. You know, I can do this. I can write songs.
Yeah.
And with a lot of encouragement from him, I proceeded to sort of start writing songs again, and I also remembered a lot of songs that I'd written when I was still taking drugs that deserved to be heard. I thought that had never really been fully realised. Bands that I'd been in that I'd completely fucking ruined by being a smackhead, you know. And Mick Mick said to me, "Listen, Simon, I've got songs I wrote 20 years ago that I haven't finished yet, you know." I think it's a shame sometimes people confine things to their hard drive, never to be sort of heard. When actually, you know, you've got something, you know, put it up, have another look at it. So I did that, started to write. I then went on tour last year, beginning of last year, I was on tour with the Libertines for a few months in my role as a sort of, maybe you don't want to do that, taps. Kind of. And then Peter very kindly invited me onto his solo tour in the spring of last year. He said, why don't you read some extracts from your book, play a couple of songs, it'd be nice. We had Jack Jones with us, Dead Cuts played a few shows, and then obviously Peter's solo band. And essentially what happened was someone spotted me, really, I suppose that's what you call it, sort of in the same way Kate Moss was once plucked from the obscurity of Croydon. I just had to link myself with Kate Moss there.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I put you two in the same category all the time, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Someone very kindly said, look, I really like those songs you played tonight, and can I get them anywhere? And I said, no, you can't unless you come round my house. I'll play them to you. And they took my number, and a few weeks later they called me up and they said, look, I want you to make an album. I've got a little bit of money, I've got no debts, no kids, no mortgage. How much do you need? And I said, well, that's the kind of ultimate how long is a bit of string question, really. So I was actually in the studio when this person rang me. I was there with Peter, and there was this amazing studio called Doghouse Studios just outside London, Henley-on-Thames. And I went and spoke to the guy that owns it, this lovely chap called Barry Barlow, drummer in Jethro Tull. Yeah, Barry was the drummer in Jethro Tull when drummers made enough money to buy massive houses at the side of the River Thames. And he said, look, I know a little bit about you, Simon. I've read your book. And this is where I started to realise that the book I wrote was actually going to change my life. I didn't make any money out of it, but anyway. So he offered me a deal for 8 days that he had available in the summer of last year. He said, that's all I've got these 8 days. You can have it for half price. I think you're one of the last good guys. I know you blah, blah, blah. So I put the phone down, like, shit, right, okay, I've got 8 days. Someone's going to pay for it. I haven't got a band. This time last year, Hightown Pirates didn't exist. I run one of my oldest and dearest friends, Matt Purslow, who I played with over the years that I've known since we were teenagers. Himself, no stranger to some of the problems I'd had in my earlier life. I said, look, I've got these dates. He said, fucking hell, I'm free. I've just gone self-employed. I can take some time off. Can you get John Finnegan to play drums? Johnny used to play with me way back in the day. Rung Johnny up next. He said, man, that's weird. I just quit drumming with the Gang of Four. I'm free. I can do it.
Wow.
Rung a friend of mine, David Aird, who's another incredible guitarist, musician, and I'm like, David, and he said, what the dates? Gave him the dates. He said, fucking that's really weird. The wife's taking the kids away for the first time on their own without me in 10 years. I can do it.
Wow.
And it was everything just within the space of half an hour. I'd gone from wandering up and down the garden of the studio, waiting for Peter to get his shit together, to being offered the money to make an album, and I had a band.
That is amazing, mate. That's serendipitous, isn't it? You have to...
And it absolutely felt like that. It felt like, okay, this is clearly meant to be. Well, then what happened was I realised I didn't have a bass player, and I rang a friend of mine called Pete Wilkinson, formerly of Cast and the Bunnymen and Shack and whatever, and I asked him to play bass, and initially he said he could, and then a couple of weeks later he said, look, so I've got something's come up, I can't do it, I'm really sorry. Try my friend Mark Neary. He gave me this guy's number, and I'd never met Mark. I rang him, and he said, yeah, Pete's told me about it. He said, like, I'll give it a listen when you come round to my house. And I said, where are you? And he gave me his address, and I was like 2 minutes away, randomly in London. Went round his house, played him a couple of songs. He went, yeah, I'm up for this. Pete's told me a little bit about you. I'll help out. And I said, I don't want to be like bolshy or rude. I said, but who have you played with? Because I didn't know anything about him. He said, I did a bit with Van Morrison, Adele. I'm like, right, okay. And I gave him the name of the studio, and he looked it up online. He said, yeah, nice little studio, but you're going to need an engineer, and you're going to need some outboard equipment. And I was like, oh, do you know anyone? He said, yeah, I engineered some stuff recently. You'll like this bit. I said, anything I might know? And he pointed to the platinum disc on his wall, and it's Noel Gallagher, High Flying Birds, first album. He said, I did that. And I'm like, anyone else that I might know? He said, did a few sessions with the Stones. And I'm like, fuck. So my next question to him was, well, I can't afford you.
Yeah.
He said, you can afford me. He said, I really like the idea of this. I like the vibe. We agreed a ridiculously small fee.
Wow.
I had a band. 3 weeks later, we had 4 rehearsals. band had never played together before, James.
Yeah.
4 rehearsals. And on the 5th day, we went back to Doghouse Studios and we recorded the album in 5 days, the album that you've been listening to.
That is mental. But you know what? I was going to say that the album has a sound of... It doesn't feel like a live recording, but it's got the essence of... These are people in a room together playing. You know what I mean? It's not... A lot of albums these days, they're beautifully produced, but you can't hear... You can't hear the strings on wood, or you can't hear the truth of it. But I think your album definitely has that. It's definitely got that feel of, well, these are people in a room together, you know, and you can hear it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, look, I'm so glad you said that, because that's exactly what I wanted. We all looked at each other, and you know, the band in its full kind of complement. There's 9 of us. We have a horn section. They weren't there at that particular time, but we invited friends. My missus came down. She brought my daughter. The dog was there. Matty's, you know, kids came. They set up camp on the lawn, and Barry came down to sort of see us after a couple of days. You know, the guy who owns the studio, and he's like, "I've never seen anything like this. It's like you kind of just moved in with everything that matters to you." And I'm like, "Yeah, because we might not ever get a chance to do this again."
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just had that kind of, and you're right. I remember looking at Matty sort of halfway through the first, second day's recording, and we're just going, "This is just, you know, let's celebrate this."
Yeah, enjoy it.
Because the people in that room and in the band, Mark not aside, and I don't mean that in disparagement, we've known each other for years. We've all been through. It's no secret that most of the core members of High Town Pirates are recovering drug addicts.
Mm.
We don't even have the right to be alive. Some of us. I might sound overly dramatic, but we've been through some fucking horrific shit.
Mm.
And the sound I wanted to capture was one of joy and celebration, and you know, and put a smile on people's faces.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. Who's the female vocalist you got on there? Because she's
so
great.
The female vocalist you can hear is another good friend of mine, Shona Carmen. She's someone that I've known for a number of years. I'd always had it in mind that I wanted that soul, you know, and I wanted the horn section. The horn section, they're all from Liverpool, Shona and Simon James and Martin Smith. We've played with Shaq, Super Furry Animals, Coral, you know, I called them, I sent them the recordings we'd made. We went up to Liverpool. They came down in a day, all of them, and they just nailed it in a day. And I tried to pay them, like, just give us the fucking cab fare. Couldn't pay them. They wouldn't take any money.
Brilliant.
They were like, "This is boss. We're up for it. It's great. It sounds, you know, we know you helped me account." Just everyone that came to it essentially for peanuts, not even peanuts in some cases, you know, and just wanted to be part of it because they could feel exactly what you just described, a sense of kind of connection and, you know, joy, I would say.
No, that's fantastic. And
even though some of the subject matter is fairly dark.
Yeah, it's dark, but it's you know, but it's that feel to it, isn't it? It's the feel of coming through it. You know, I think that's the you're not in a it's not a dark kind of Joy Division sound. I think you've got, for those people that haven't heard it, I'd say definitely Weller. You know, you can really hear Weller in there, and the horns and the flute as well. There's flute throughout, right? Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, you're hearing flute. Yeah, that's Lily Vassell. Lily came and joined us. She was like a last minute. You know, I'd met her once and I thought maybe flute would be interesting. I don't know why. I have no idea why I thought that. But she came in and she's also in recovery herself, and she just was instantly fitted. And you know, that kind of the weather influence. I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve. But again, where we recorded, you know, Lower Shipwreck, you know, it was this time. It was almost a year ago. English summer. You kind of got that whole kind of Nick Drake traffic, that kind of feel to it in some of the songs, I think. You know, and so you know that. Wildwood, Weller, you know, it's an easy kind of jump.
Small Faces, Autumn Stone has that flute solo in it, doesn't it? That's, I love that. But no, nice one, mate. So everyone that's listening, you know, make sure you check that out. It's on Spotify, isn't it? And you can get. Can you buy physical copies of it?
You can. You can get vinyl, CD, download. Amazon are selling it for us, or for them, really. Not.
You get a penny.
Yeah, and we obviously, when we play live, we've been doing a bit more very soon. you can come and see us. You can buy it off us. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's great. But no, well done for that. Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing now. But you want to talk about what I was doing 20 years ago?
Yeah, let's get back a little bit, shall we?
It is Oasis podcast, not Hometown Pilots podcast.
Yeah, it is.
Well, maybe we'll do another one another day. Anyway.
No, absolutely. No, more than happy to stay in touch. And I'm sure what often happens with these is we end up chatting on a lot of rubbish and then sort of coming off the phone and think, oh, there's all those 17 things I meant to ask and forgot about. So there's definitely people that are coming back on to do a part 2, and obviously you're more than welcome to. But I mean, taking it back, so so your book is essential reading. So I don't want to just go over, everyone that's out there, all of the Oasis fans that listen to this, you need to read Simon's book, Too High, Too Far, Too Soon, because it paints the picture of the 90s, that mad period in a way that I don't think anyone else can. And it's sort of and the way that you write it as well, it doesn't feel like ghost written. It feels like this is just you, heart on your sleeves, saying it how it is.
That's because it's not ghost written.
Well, that'll be it then.
Yeah, that'll be why.
Yeah. But the one thing I was going to say is that you talk about in the book, you mention, like, obviously there's a sort of a very kind of traumatic couple of years for you, which kind of, you get the feeling that pretty much everything that's happened after you was kind of a shadow from that, really. And then then the impact of that and what happened to you at school and things. I mean, I don't need to go into that, it's all in there in the book, but I just wanted you to talk about, what music meant to you and what music meant to you to get through that really sort of dark few years you had.
Okay, so, people, like you said, it's all well documented, but I was in a Catholic boarding school, and a lot of the things that people hear about that happened in Catholic boarding schools, and still do, sadly, happened to me, and I'll sort of leave it at that. But when I was 12, I had a friend of mine who was very cool parents, and they got us a pair of tickets to go and see the Jam. That's how old I am, right? Even though 12 is a pretty good age to start going to see bands. I went to see the Jam when I was 12 with my mate Tim Holt, and the world changed forever. It's as simple as that. We went along. It was at a place called the Stafford Bingley Hall. The Jam were the biggest band in the country at that point, I would say. We adored them. They were the Jam, the best band ever. Yeah. I realised that what I was being told at school and the whole kind of scaremongering, heavy fucking Catholicism, thou shalt not, punishment, was just a load of fucking nonsense. Yeah. And there was another world, and the escapism, because essentially that's what music gave me when I was in that situation, and still does to this day. I latched onto it, and I fucking gobbled it up, and I saw the Jam again, the following year, and that became my religion, music, because it made sense to me. The book, I turned the book into a one-man show, and I toured it on and off, and there's a scene in the play where I pick up a C90 cassette, which was given to me. It's not the same one, but after my old man died, there was horrible stuff was happening where the older kids, a guy called Martin Johnson, who I am friends with, and I actually saw him in Manchester the other day. He was a bit older than me, and he gave me the C90 cassette, and it had like the Jam and the Buzzcocks and the Who and the Pistols on it, and he went, look, I'm really sorry that your old man's died, and anyway, I've done this compilation tape for you. And it kept me alive. Wow. I had a little cassette player and an earpiece, and I just listened to it at night. And the Who particularly, because they were, I had no idea, I couldn't articulate how I felt, but Pete Townsend certainly could.
Well, that's what I love the Who, and what I love about the Who is that often the songs are about inarticulation, right? I can't explain.
Yeah. Exactly.
He's saying,
and there's a noise to them, and there's a rage, and there's just and so that kind of, that's where it started. I saw the Jam, I saw the Smiths, and I also talk about the Smiths in the book a little bit, and I think I say, listening to their first album reminded me, and I can almost quote it because it's so important, reminded me when I needed to be reminded that the world could still provide moments of real beauty.
Yeah.
And I will be forever indebted to the Smiths for just sort of, because it was horrible. I was 13, my old man was dead, I was getting abused physically, mentally, and the Smiths kind of, the jam had split up, and I was a bit lost. You know, I thought, fucking, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
Now, Noel talks about his sit-up moment, seeing the Smiths on Top of the Pops for the first time. A whole generation of us, I would imagine, had that same sit-up moment.
Yeah.
I certainly had it. Johnny Marr just looked cool, amazing.
Yeah.
You know, so I shared that with, and I talked to Noel about that many years ago, and he went, "Yeah, you know, it was, wasn't it? It was like, well, okay, that's what I'm going to wear. That's the music I'm going to, you know, it's like I needed instruction. I didn't know. I was some pleb in a 13, you know, in school going, I don't know what to do anymore. The jam is split up. You know, I don't know what to wear. I mean, you know. I say that, I don't feel any way about it. I don't feel sad about that. It's like, I'm a kid. I want someone show me. I've got no dad. I've got no older brother. What am I going to do? So the Smiths kind of segued eventually into, you know, the Roses and the Mondays, by which point, you know, I'd started going to festivals and, you know, using drugs. And I suppose to try and stay more or less on track with your podcasts, irrespective of what else was going on in my life, when I saw Oasis at the Water Rats in 1993, possibly, and 93 being in 94, you'll have to sort of check your stats on that. I can't remember, I should know, but I don't. I had another sit-up moment.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't a sit-up moment. I was standing there with a couple hundred people in this room, jammed into a room, going, fucking hell. Fucking... Because it felt like what they'd done is they had taken the essence of every band I'd loved that were no longer in existence. The Roses were on some, you know, sabbatical or were about to release another, you know. They'd taken a bit of all that. Noel had done exactly what I tried to do with my first album, actually, is suck up everything that I love and put my own spin on it.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like in the Water Rats, just standing there going, this is my band.
Wow.
This is my band. And literally, I had goosebumps all over me. And do you know what? I'm not lying. I've got goosebumps now as I remember it.
Yeah.
And it's not a coincidence that my band are launching our album at the Water Rats next Wednesday. Going to show that.
No,
by the way. So that's we've kind of gone through we've gone through 10 years there. We've gone from the Jam to the Smiths and the Roses to Oasis at the Water Rats, but it absolutely had the same impact as that first Jam gig, seeing the Smiths on TV, seeing the Roses in 89, seeing the Mondays around. You know, it was like, okay, this makes sense to me.
Yeah, but that's what you want, isn't it? Then it is like when you get a new band that is like, that's different. This is special, you know, and it's they don't come along very often, and there hasn't been one come along for a while. You know, it's sort of, there's been people that have come along, and like I think the Libertines had that definitely when. I was
going to say that. I think the Libertines probably, and I have to, you know, hands in the air. I was a terrible rotten heroin addict by the time the Libertines arrived, and I kind of missed it all.
Yeah.
And I didn't come to the Libertines, in fact, until I saw them for the first time when I was working for them last year. I'd never seen them before, and then it made sense.
Yeah, but no, I mean, that's brilliant to hear you sort of talk about that first Oasis show. I mean, the way you describe it in the book as well. You know, you do there's a good few pages on that. It just, and you know, and the atmosphere of and even at that point, you know, the buzz was there. People knew this was a special band. You know, that you know, obviously the McGee Glasgow King Tut's gig had happened, so people knew that they'd been signed, and it was
they'd been signed. I mean, the thing is, the room was full of A&R men that had missed the boat. Basically, they're all standing there chatting shit to each other with their ponytails and really bad, ill-fitting suits, and just go, "How do we miss this?" Because you always fucking miss it. That's why.
Absolutely.
Because you don't like music enough.
Yeah. And it takes a genius like McGee to see it.
Middle-class posh boys that are just in it to make as much money as you can.
Absolutely.
That sounds very disparaging and bitter, but, you know, it's not the whole truth, but it's certainly part of the truth, you know.
Yeah. No,
people didn't know what to do with them. Only people like McGee, you're right, you know, got it and went, you know what, this is a bit special, you know, and I don't want to change them. I don't want to smooth out the rough edges. I don't care what they look like. The music, you know, that white label, that 12-inch of Columbia is, to this day and always will be one of the most remarkable pieces of music ever.
No, that's amazing. So let's sort of take it from there. So you saw them at that first show, and then you come back to see them at what, Kentish Town? Is it the next time?
No, I saw them before Kentish Town. I saw them at the 100 Club. I saw them at where the old it's not there anymore, the Marquee.
Yeah.
I caught both those shows, and that's where I met them for the first time, was at the Marquee.
Okay.
Someone said, "Oh, can you pop backstage? Someone wants something."
Mm-hmm.
We'll leave it at that. And I walked into an argument between Noel and Liam about why Liam didn't have any money, and Noel just going, "Because I write all the fucking songs." They were going, "Yeah, but I'm the star." And they're, "Yeah, but I write the songs." "Yeah, but you're a knobhead." "Yeah, but I write the songs." "Yeah, but you're a dickhead." "Yeah, but I write the songs." "You'll get yours when the album comes out." "When's the album coming out?" "Don't know." And I'm standing there going, "You rang?" And do you know what? There's something I've never spoken about, and it's just in the audience that night was God bless him, Richie from the Manic Street Preachers. I was just standing next to him.
Yeah.
Not because I knew him, obviously knew who he was. And I remember as Oasis were finishing with "I'm the Walrus," and people just, mouths open, and Liam kind of walks off, and I don't, and I looked at Richie, and the Manics had very famously said that they were going to make one album and split up.
Yeah.
And they hadn't done that. And this is just a theory. And I kind of looked at him, and he was looking at them, and he disappeared a few days later, never to be seen again. I sometimes think, I wonder if he kind of saw a band that were going to do at that point, and make one album and split up.
Saw the future. That
is
crazy.
He might not, I don't know if he would have liked it or not. I don't know. I don't know why I remember it. I just remember it vividly because I imagine Richie was not easily impressed, but he clearly was like everyone else in that show at the Marquee, because it wasn't that long after the Waterworks, a couple of months maybe, and they got even better, and there was more confidence and more swagger, and the volume had got louder, and you were just like, this is an unstoppable force.
That's awesome. That's awesome, mate. And so did you then? You just started following them around, really, and sort of seeing as many.
We became friends. Yeah, we hung out. It was I think to use a biological term, symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
They were providing me with moments of extreme joy, and I was helping them stay awake.
Yeah.
Or chill out, whatever was required. We hung out, and the fact the guy that I bumped into at Ride yesterday, David Coates, who was a school friend of Liam, he said to me on Tuesday night, he said, "Do you know what, we had the best time of our lives, didn't we?" And other people's probably. And he's got an 18-year-old son, and he was trying to explain to his lad the other day, he said, "Oh, son, you got..." And his dad went, "Oh, fuck off, you old git."
Well, that's what you want, though, isn't it? You want...
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I'm going to say at this point, I was a very, 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 very small part of all that.
Yeah.
Let's just be clear. Some people might choose to call me a hanger-on, whatever, but you know what? If you were me then, in my position, you'd have fucking hung on to.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
That's really kind of how I see it. I'm not going to claim any kind of... I almost made the cover of what's the single where they're all sitting on the floor in a hotel, you've got Noel playing a guitar. And,
Cigarettes and Alcohol.
Yeah. We were all at the Halcyon Hotel in Holland Park on that photo shoot. And originally I was going to be sitting on the floor, and then Noel went, "Yeah, but you might get arrested. We'll put Tim Abbott there instead." so it's Tim Abbott of Creation Records with his hand in the air and a bottle going, "Come on," and I'm just out of shot going, "That should be me."
But it wouldn't be a bottle.
No.
No, that's cool. So then, just going through them individually, I mean, you talk about kind of being just kind of awestruck by Liam's aura in the book. You know, I mean, he was. I mean, he would have been a bit younger than you at the time, I think.
He'd have been, so he'd have been 22, 23, maybe, something like that, yeah.
But I mean, he was. I mean, just as them as individually. I mean, what was Liam like around that time? And
he was Liam.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely confident and you know, this is where just that belief, a belief that they were going to be bigger than the Beatles. You know.
Awesome.
Completely unshakable, funny, charming, didn't suffer fools, you know, entertaining, cheeky, you know, had this sort of sense of, you know, nice to meet you, get out of my way.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way, you know.
No, of course.
And I think he might not have realised it or admit it, but I think there was a genuine excitement. You know, Noel, you know, as everyone knows, had been in the music business for years by this point.
Yeah.
He'd kind of seen it and done it and knew what was going on. Whereas I think Liam was, you know, obviously at the centre of it all, and there was a kind of genuine excitement about everything. I thought, come on, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that really comes across in the early interviews, you know, and you see it on Supersonic, and you see it in the early interviews. There's genuine excitement, and you know, in each stage, it's like, now we're playing clubs, now we're playing arenas, now we're going to Japan, now we're doing, you know, and it was just they were excited, they were genuinely excited about it.
Yeah,
which is understandable.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about the other? Sorry, go on, mate.
No, go on. What about?
I was going to say, what about the other guys? I mean, we don't sort of focus enough, I think, on like Bonehead, Griggs, and Tony as it was at the time.
I think Tony was. I mean, he was almost. I would say, kind of overawed by the whole thing.
Yeah. Perhaps.
I don't think, and he's willing. I'm happy for him to correct me, but I don't think he had any idea what was happening until it really started to happen.
Yeah.
I may be wrong about that, and if I am, I apologise to Tony McCarroll. You know, but I think Griggs was too stoned to really give a fuck. To be honest, he was just like happy there playing bass, just kind of like, I just want to build a spliff and get stoned. And I think Bonehead and I saw Paul in Manchester last year, and we hadn't seen each other years, and he was lovely and came over and gave me a hug because he read my book. And, he said, "I'm really glad you fucking survived," you know, and I'm like, "I'm really glad you survived as well." Because he was happiest on stage and after the show with a nice wine and a cig. You know, I used to hang out with Owen Morris, I think, more than anyone else if Owen was around. And he was incredibly funny. I remember one night we were in the Columbia Hotel, and Bonehead decides he's going to give us his Elton John impersonation on the piano. And I should point out that Elton John is a better piano player than Paul Arthur's. He might have improved.
Controversial.
But maybe we could have a piano off one day. We get them both together and go, right, Elton, you play Rocket Man. Bonehead, you play Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, whatever. And we'll see what. Anyway, and maybe the fact that he'd had about 5 bottles of wine, but he took on the role of the entertainer, and the whole lounge, and you know, was just in hysterics. It was so funny, and he clearly enjoyed that. And I would imagine that he enjoyed it because most of the time he wasn't the centre of attention for obvious reasons. But give him an opportunity, you know, and he seized it. And again, he was. I think he sort of went, you know what, I'm going to make the most of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the cool. I mean, that's the impression that we get, is that, you know, these were 5 guys that had no God-given right to do this. You know, it wasn't like they were. You know, it wasn't like they went to the conservatoire, you know, or anything like that. These were not people that were being picked out for stardom from an early age. If they hadn't been picked out by McGee, they would have been bricklayers, you know, on the dole or whatever it would have been. They wouldn't have, you know, and I think they really appreciated that, and they came across as, I mean, I think Liam probably always felt he was destined for something, but, you know, it's all, to get extremely famous at the age of 21, you will think that.
Well, Noel was already 27, right, when this started to happen. Now, I know artists, musicians now, really great music, great bands and songs at the record industry. You're past it, you're 27.
Yeah.
You know, you get written off.
Yeah.
And I sort of wonder sometimes whether Noel kind of knew that it was this or that was it.
Right. It's more lugging guitars around for these
thankfully, I think times have changed a little bit these days. I mean, I'm 47. I'm just about to make my first record, or just released my first one. Anyway, it's irrelevant. So I think Noel kind of knew. You know, he knew that the superficialness and the vagaries of the music industry, and he was like, nothing was going to stop him. He got what he needed around him, and he was on his mission, and Liam was at the centre of that. I think the other guys were like, let's just stay with this because we ain't going to get a better offer.
Yeah,
and then, of course, they were all friends.
Yeah, childhood mates, yeah.
Hence your gang mentality that is ripped through, whether it's the Clash or whoever, you know, that, or the Smith, you know. That's what they were, and they spoke in their own sort of language, and you know, it was remarkable to behold.
No, fair play. And then look, we've got to talk about the motorway, breaking down on the motorway, heading up to Tea in the Park.
We were going to the first Tea in the Park festival, which was in Strathclyde County Park in Glasgow. We'd been out the night before. Me and Liam went to a rave in Tune, in the old shopping centre, the old Bullring in Hume, which was being demolished. And it was one of the most bizarre nights of my bizarre life. Because it was just, it felt like we were on the set of Mad Max or something, you know, in like a sort of partially demolished shopping centre with a couple of thousand people all absolutely off their tits, raving to, you know, I ended up sitting on the roof of some derelict building, and anyway, the point is that we kind of stayed awake. I got back to Liam's house. He lived on Clyde Road, I think, in Didsbury at that point, and he'd gone home. I think he was bored. He knew that he had a gig coming up, and he had to try and get some sleep. I think I'll be generous like that. Maybe he just didn't like rave music. I don't know, but he fucked off. He'd gone home. I had no idea how to find his house. I found it eventually, and I rang the bell at like 5 in the morning. I opens the door and his box of shorts. He's like, oh, for fuck's sake, stay to you. I'm like, what the stay to you? Anyway, we get on the minibus, the transit van, because that's what we were operating with back then. Picks everybody up, and we head up towards Scotland. Get to Carlisle to refuel the van, and the driver of the van, whose name escapes me, forgive me, he either puts diesel into a petrol engine or petrol into a diesel engine. I can never remember which. It's not really that important. But anyway, he fucked up. And we got like 500 yards back on the motorway from the service station. Of course, the van just says, nah, not having that. And we break down, and I have my equipment for the weekend, shall we say, with me in a bag. I suppose that's probably about 20 years worth of jail, and I want to say at this point, let me just put this in there. People ask me, do I regret what I used to do for a living? And my answer to that is I wouldn't do it now.
Right.
Okay? I wouldn't do it that. I have a child, whatever, I wouldn't do it now. Yeah. At the time, I was young and foolish. Anyway, so I'm looking at this bag that I've got thinking, we just need to sort of keep our heads down here, stay in the van, wait for the AA to turn up, and then everything will be all right. The boys, Liam wasn't there. There was Noel and the rest of the band. Paul Gallagher was in the van. I think Phil Smith was there as well, maybe Jason. Owen Morris and his girlfriend. They decided, rather than sort of keep a low profile, I mean, they don't give a fuck, right? They're not the ones holding a 20 stretch. I remember the old Bill drive past, and maybe I was being paranoid, but I'm pretty sure, like, the passenger in the police car, I looked at and was like, they look like they're fucking up to something, which was, of course, they're Oasis, of course they're up to something. That's what we love about them. Anyway, the busies didn't stop, but Noel and Phil decided that now would be a perfect time for a game of frisbee. And Why they had a frisbee with them, who fucking knows? They probably stole it at the service station. And they proceed to have a game of frisbee across the motorway. Like 6 lanes of fucking traffic. I think Phil Smith was on the other side, and Noel's trying to get this frisbee across to him. And I'm sitting in the van going, oh, I'm going to jail, they're going to bump me to death, fucking hell. And it went on for a while until, thankfully, the AA turned up. Not the 12-step, not the people that fix vans. Right, they turned up. And what happened next kind of sums up where I was at and where everyone was at that point. So the guy from the AA, he turns up in his little van and he's like, okay, yeah, the engine's fucked, we can sort it, but I've only got 4 spaces in my van and you obviously need to get to Glasgow. So Noel obviously has to get in the van. That's really important that he gets there. Being the gentleman that he is, he says to Owen's girlfriend, because she was pregnant at the time, Penny, you need to get in the van, you're a pregnant woman. Owen, you obviously have to come because I can't run off with your girlfriend when she's pregnant. That wouldn't be a good look. So there's 1 seat left, right? So there's 1 seat left. There's the rest of the band minus Liam and a couple of roadies and me sitting in the van, paranoid, thinking the police are going to turn up and we're going to get searched and I'm going to, spend the rest of my life in jail. And then Noel just looks at me and goes, "Get in the van." Which, for better or worse, my ego was like, I am the Messiah.
Yep. And a naughty boy.
Get in the van, and I remember looking out the window as we drove off, feeling a little bit guilty that I'd left Bonehead and Griggs and the crew at the side of the motorway whilst me and Noel and Owen and Penny sped off up to Glasgow and got to the festival.
Fair enough.
They got there as well, obviously, and went on to play what I think Liam spoke about it actually last year when they were doing press for Supersonic. One of the best gigs they ever did.
And that's because of the person who introduced them on, right? Because he got the crowd so going up for it.
They needed an encouragement, but Marcus Russell said to me before he went on, why don't you go and G the crowd up a little bit? So I'm not one to sort of shy away from opportunities like that, and the fact that I was absolutely off my tits. Went out in front of, it was in a marquee, remember, it wasn't a main stage gig. They'd been booked way back in the year, they were on between, I think Tiny Monroe, who exactly were on after them, but they contractually that's where they were due to play. So it was a Saturday afternoon in a reasonably sized marquee, couple of thousand people maybe should have been in there. There was probably 5 times that amount. There were people hanging off the fucking roof, footballs flying. It was you could feel it. It was going to go off.
Yeah.
There was just that. You get that at football. And you get it at rock and roll gigs. I don't think you don't get it at cricket. You know what I mean?
No.
Excuse me. If you like cricket, you just we're all here now. We're all having the best time of our life. And I walk out on stage and I uttered the absolute truth. Please, make some fucking noise for the greatest rock and roll band in the world, because they were right there and then. They absolutely were. And they came on and. Started playing Shaker Maker, and I'm still standing in front of Liam's microphone, going, "Come on!" and it's not until Liam taps me on the shoulder and he's like, "Look, fuck off."
Okay.
Get off the stage. I better get off now. But for those 5 seconds, I was the singer in the greatest rock and roll band in the world. So I had 5 seconds of it.
Yeah.
Which is 5 seconds more than most people are ever going to have. So I hold on to that. And they went on, and it was a phenomenal gig.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. It was everything you'd want in a band, just pure, celebratory, dirty, scuzzy, fucking sing-along. Yeah. Nothing else. We could have walked outside of that tent after the gig and there could have been a nuclear war and no one would have given a fuck.
No.
Fuck it, we're going to die, but we've just seen that,
That's great.
That's how good it was.
That's so cool. Good. And then so sort of moving on, so you carried on being a big part of the entourage, as you might want to put it, for a while throughout what that 94 or 95. I think it's sort of funny in your book. You then kind of, because you go off on holiday and you go off to these different places and things, and then it's sort of you get to the Nebworth story. But what happened between kind of the, so into like 95 and stuff? Were you still around and still part of it throughout that?
Well, what happened is that they no longer had a transit van. The van's got bigger, the entourage gets bigger. There are more people all trying to fit themselves in somewhere into that. My drug addiction was pretty much dictating where I was by that point, sadly. I think, I remember being at the White Room with them when they played Acquiesce live for the first time.
Wow.
And there was a very happy, funny, sad moment between Liam and Paulie Yates, which I think someone else has written about ages ago. I was at the Hacienda when they played the Hacienda. That was an amazing show. The after show downstairs, Manchester's finest gangsters and rock stars all in the same room. Sean Ryder with a really bad moustache, I remember that quite well. Members of the then Man City football team in the dressing room, and everyone going, "What the fuck are they doing here?" Well, they're there because Noel invited them, obviously. And then Nebworth, so 21 years ago next month, was really, for me, that was the end.
Yeah.
And I won't kill the story. I'd like people to read that, but you've read the book, But it was the end for me on all sorts of levels. There is I would call it, in the music industry, there is a double standard when it comes to drugs.
Yeah.
And I've said this on many, many occasions. I get asked to speak to members of the public and whatever, when people sort of, drugs are drugs, right? Addiction is addiction. Drugs are neither good or bad. They just are what they are. Addiction is a terrible thing. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And at that point in my life, I was an absolute fucking mess. And a liability, I guess. And so no one ever said to me, "Fuck off, you junkie cunt." The only person that ever said that to me was me, really. And you can't be around that in the state I was in, and so therefore I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving Nebworth, and I will sort of kill the story, but I didn't see them. I didn't watch them. I got there, I realised that I'd left my supply of heroin in London, and I walked around the backstage area at Nebworth, which was a kind of who's of, by that point, Z-list celebrities and people you think, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
You
weren't at the Water Rats 2 years ago.
Yeah, you're here now anyway, whatever, and on the way out, I remember sort of walking past the main stage and seeing, you had to have like 25 different coloured laminates and wristbands to sort of access even the fucking roadies by that point. It all happened so quickly. And I just had this sort of feeling that I didn't want that, really.
No.
I mean, I didn't know what I wanted, to be fair. I was a heroin addict and a crackhead and whatever. But as I was walking out, I mean, I'd managed to get the necessary passes to do whatever I was there to do, and I just decided I'm going home, I don't want this. And there was this teenage lad walking in, and I took all my laminates off, and I stuck them around his neck. He had no idea who I was. I wasn't anybody, was I? But I said, "John, get yourself backstage, you're all cunts anyway." And I walked out, and it's still like mid-afternoon, early, and so the majority of people are on the way in.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was walking against this sort of sea of humanity that were all there to go and have one of the best nights of their life. And I had to leave because I was a heroin addict that didn't have any smack. I had to go home. That's what I did.
That's
very
crazy,
sad.
Man.
Very sad.
Yeah, it is sad. That's the tricky thing about the book is that, it's, there's a fine line between tragedy and comedy, as someone cleverer than me came up with, and it is. It's really entertaining and it's really enjoyable to be on the outside and kind of these mad stories and these mad interactions, and even things like your first trip down to London and you haven't even got a clue. You've swallowed the paper that had the guy's address on it. It's funny, but it's also really, really sad. And I mean, I think can you see that, especially when you're doing the one-man shows and things? You're telling these stories.
That was a deliberate choice that I made when I wrote it. When I wrote the book, when I do the play, is that the last thing the world needs is another 300 pages of someone's fucking misery, right? And and I've learned over the years, that. I mean, it's no different from music, really. You have shades of light and dark, right? All the music that I really like, I don't like thrash metal. Why? Because it's all there's no shades in it, right? Yeah. I like Definitely Maybe because it has, but also has, right? And it's the same with writing for me, and I'd like to think that the album we just made certainly has shades of all that stuff in it because it keeps the interest. And on an emotional level, I think whether you're a songwriter, it's a great trick that all great songwriters, whether it's Noel or Mick Head or whoever, or Weller or whoever you want to talk, they're not afraid to be sensitive.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to show vulnerability, and then the next song punch you in the face,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Someone said to me,
and I think with the writing, I was conscious of that. It's like, what? I'm going to make you laugh. I'm going to make you cry. I'm going to make you smash your face against the table with frustration.
Yeah.
And hopefully, at the end of it, I'm going to make you feel happy because there's hope at the end of all this.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, often with kind of stories, and if anyone that watches kind of music documentaries and things, they always tend to take this same, anyone that a lot of people that get into drugs and then, it goes a certain way and then, you see this kind of regular sort of story plays out again and again. But the problem is it's messy, isn't it? It's not like, it's not like, oh, and then, say if that day at Nebworth you went back and then you realised and then you turned your life around then. Well, no, you didn't. You had another decade of horrible, just a shit life of just horrible stuff happening to you. So
yeah, and it was another decade. Yeah, it was another 10 years. And that almost kind of explains the grip of addiction in a perfect way, because the rest of the world been watching what I was doing. Some of them were, but the crowds were getting thinner and thinner. They go, "You're fuck, what are you doing?
Yeah,
you just walked out on." As Noel said, we're making history.
Yeah.
But I was being driven by the fact that I wasn't prepared to watch Oasis make history, whilst I was clucking my tits off for a bit of gear.
Jesus.
And I've spoke to a lot of people over the years that were happening with in various bands, and I won't name any names, but a lot of them were like, I'm not really sure what that was about.
Yeah.
And I've looked for this quote, and it was McGee that told it to me over the phone. So somewhere along the line, I think Noel actually said, we should have all kind of gone home really after that and sort of had a look at ourselves, or looked after ourselves. Whether that, I mean, McGee was clean. He'd already stopped taking drugs for all this. So people might not realise that. That's why he missed all this. He wasn't around.
Mm.
He was doing what I had to do, in 2000 to figure out how to live without drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people, whether that was the high watermark, and I wrote a piece for Loaded magazine when they relaunched that, somewhat unsuccessfully a couple of years ago, about that Nebworth was kind of metaphorically left a sort of brown stain on the Britpop bath.
Yeah.
Because what happened next to a lot of people, and I've met a lot of them, and a lot of them are dead, is that thankfully the majority of people were like, okay, it's time to sort of maybe slow down a little bit now and get a proper job and have a career and have children and But there was an inordinate amount of people, musicians and music fans, that for whatever reason couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And just, and I've sat in enough NA meetings over the years when I've heard people say things like, I don't know what happened. 1 minute we were at Spike Island or Castle Morton or Nebworth having the time of our life, and then 10 years later I was still going to the chemist to get fucking methadone because I can't stop taking drugs.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's anyone's fault, but there was this huge thing that happened in the 90s in an unprecedented way of people kind of sticking their nose in the trough, shall we say.
Yeah.
That had never happened before on that scale. And the casualty rate was quite high.
Yeah.
Does that mean it was a bad thing? No. Will any of us change it? Probably not. But nonetheless, whether it was Noel that said that or McGee that said that, but you know what, it would have been, it was good advice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Noel said, there's the famous, taking drugs is like having a cup of tea quote, which caused controversy at the time. But, and then you had, I suppose, because Trainspotting came out at the time as well, which was then caused a, furore about, was it glamorising drugs, which is ridiculous when that's a film in which a baby dies, and...
Yeah.
And
I went to see T2 a few months ago when it came out.
Yeah.
And I was with my girlfriend on the way out, and she went, "Are you okay?" And I said, "You know what? I remember going to see Trainspotting, a bunch of us, and we were all using heroin, and that's the sort of the not so secret, dirty secret of Britpop, really, and it's well documented by lots of people. John Harris's book, The Last Party, talks about whatever bands." And she said, "Why do you feel so sad?" I said, "Because the 5 people that I went to see the original Trainspotting with are all dead.
Jesus.
And I'm the only one that's still alive,
That is crazy, man. That is crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, so it's, it's been 20 years since Be Here Now. It's been 20 years since Trainspotting. I mean, you've done the counselling and things over the years. I mean, is it different now? Is the level of drug taking it felt like in the 90s, whether it was just culturally people were more aware of it, but it did feel like it was reaching a height with heroin and heroin use particularly, and coke. I mean, from your position as having done the counselling and things, is it levelled off? Is it dropped away? Has it gone up? What do you think?
It's a really good question, and I was at the Great Escape Festival a month or so ago on a panel having that discussion, about drugs in the music industry and what, if anything, can be done. And there are, I'm involved with a new charity called Music Support, which is there for people in the industry as someone you can go to. Because I think it's a bit like, I'll be honest, I'm the same. When you hear a footballer complaining, you're like, "Oh, shut the fuck up, mate." When you're on fucking £100 a week, I've got to go and stack shelves for, fucking whatever, 50p an hour. What have you got to complain about? And I think what happened in the Britpop era, for want of a better expression, was that a lot of people kind of knew that they were in trouble.
Yeah.
But felt they had no right to complain, and even if they were going to complain or wanted to talk to someone, there wasn't anyone to talk to.
Okay.
Because we're all going to live forever, right? So now, I got asked exactly the same question you just asked me, and my answer then, so this was, I think it was beginning of June, I was at Great Escape, and my answer was, Glastonbury's a few weeks away, there's going to be 250,000 people there, most of them will be on, at some point, something a bit stronger than coffee, 99% of them will have a good experience and go home and get on with their lives on a Monday, albeit a bit smelly and a bit hungover. But, my concern in what I do for a living these days is that 1 or 2% that can't do that.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the kids are taking these days because I'm not a kid, and I don't go out to clubs all night. 4 of my 5, 6 band members, or 9, whatever, depending on, are sober. We turn up to play our shows, and if I can get to bed by midnight, I've had a fucking result.
Yeah.
So the answer, it's a good question. I don't really know. I don't know. If you look at a historical flow chart, shall we say, this is how I kind of evidence my argument. In the 60s, everybody goes up, right? So you've got all these young mods taking amphetamines, and we go up, and the music reflects that. It's all frenetic, fucking the Who and everything goes up and up and up and up. And then you get towards the end of the 60s, and it all gets a bit psychedelic, and we have Sgt. Pepper's and the White Album, and everything slows down a little bit and goes a bit weird. and then you sort of come into the beginning of the 70s, and everybody's on a fucking downer.
Yeah.
Because the drugs changed. There were a lot of barbiturates and downers, and there was the first kind of wave of heroin addiction in this country, really, at that point.
Yeah.
And then we have fucking prog rock, so that's what you get, kids. Stay away from it. If there's a better argument to stay off heroin, I'd like to hear it, right? And glam rock, which had its moments, but generally speaking. And then we have punk rock, and everybody goes up again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everyone goes back to basics of fucking cheap speed and, and everybody's up. And then we get to the beginning of the 80s, and there's the second wave of heroin addiction and social economic factors of the country at the time, and a fucking Tory government that fucking hate people, and, and everybody comes down again, and you get the Smiths, so maybe that fucks up my argument.
Yeah, but it's not punk, is it? The Smiths is...
Yeah, no, you know what I mean? But then we move to the 80s, and you get to sort of 87, 89, and house music, and everybody goes up again on ecstasy and blah blah blah, and I think then Britpop kind of extrapolated that a little bit, and carried people on upper for a bit longer than perhaps might normally have occurred. By the end of the 90s, there's a lot of people in a really bad way. Yeah. And everybody comes down. The rates of heroin addiction have gone through the fucking roof. Beginning of this new millennium, and it seems. I remember reading articles just after I got clean about the sort of Whitechapel scene, around the Libs and other bands and whatever, and people openly talking about smoking crack, and I just remember reading it thinking, fuck, because I know what's going to happen next. Yeah. So there's a flow to all that, culturally. What goes up must come down, right?
It's a good shout, and as I say, it's a real tough one. And I know it's as we were talking earlier about the tragedy and comedy, it's a line that you have to walk, because while you want to, celebrate the great things that happened and enjoy the mad nights you had and the relationships you had with people at the time, there is also that really sad element to it. That and as you said, I mean, that's just awful. Like the other 5 people that you went to see that film with are no longer with us. So but that's just crazy, isn't it? But So I mean, what do you think? Just sort of to finish off, I mean, what's you looking back on Oasis now? What do you think of the legacy of Oasis as a band and the Britpop movement?
I think that they encouraged a lot of people that perhaps might not have picked up guitars to pick up guitars. That's not always a good thing, but if you're a fan of Kasabian or the Libertines, you have Oasis to thank for that, for sure. Mm-hmm. As far as legacies go, I don't think we'll see that happen again. No. I just don't think it's conceivable that something like that can happen again. It's all kind of been done before. I mean, I'd like to be proved wrong, but I just can't see it happening. And maybe I'm wrong, but so if there's a legacy to it, or I don't know really. Like I say, if you're a fan of the Libertines, then that you're going to be happy about that, right? I'm a fan of the Libertines, by the way. But, I'm just, and I don't want to be too dour about it, but I'm just really pleased that Liam has made an album. Yeah. Genuinely pleased for him. And I'm pleased that Noel is still doing what he does. I'm pleased that they, here's what I think. Back when I was a young man, and people go, the fucking Rolling Stones, they're 38, 40, they should quit now, it's fucking but it's embarrassing, Well, they're still making music, and their last record was fantastic. That Rolling Stones, a blues cover, was fantastic, right? They don't care. No one's going to tell Keith Richards you're too old to be a musician, right? Yeah. In the same way, no one's going to tell Liam Gallagher you're too old to be a musician. And maybe that is the legacy. That they can still influence people and they can still make records. Because of what happened then, they're still given an opportunity to do it now.
Fair play.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm all for that, you know, and I'm going to plug it for the last time. I've just made a record, right? It's really hard to get heard.
It is. Yeah.
Really difficult. I don't know anybody anymore. I can't pick up the phone to people that are in a position to shout about it. But it's part of the legacy of what I remember, because I'll tell you this for nothing. My album means as much to me as Definitely Maybe meant to Noel. For the record, I think they'd both love it if they heard it. I think they'd hear shades of what they're about. And so, if they're still making records, why can't I?
Absolutely, mate. And that's a beautiful point to leave it on, I think. So everyone that's listening to this, make sure you check out the Hightown Pirates on Spotify, or physically go and buy it. And support Simon, because he's doing what a journey this guy's been on, and he's still on a journey, but a nicer one now. And make sure you keep following him on Twitter, and just make sure I know it's just, everyone sort of says it's like, anyone that's in recovery, it's like, every day, you sort of stay, trying to stay on track, keep there, and man, I just wish you all the best, and and good luck.
You haven't asked me what my favourite Oasis song is.
Well, that's the final finish. So go on. We always end with an Oasis song. So what is your favourite Oasis song to finish with?
Well, for all the wrong reasons, here's some you might not know, but I do the hand claps on Whatever.
There we go.
So my recording debut is actually hand claps on Whatever, right? So that was 20-something years ago. That was the last time I was on a record. So it's a really good segue from Whatever by Oasis to Dry and High by Hightown Pirates. It's taken me 20 years to get on a record again, but this one's my own. So I'm going to say Whatever.
Whatever.
And there's a clip of them doing it on Top of the Pops, and I've got a very funny story maybe for another day about the day we went to do Top of the Pops with Liam and Brian Harvey from E17, but I'll maybe we'll have a catch up again. I'll tell you that one.
There you go. There's the tease for part 2. So if you go out, and everyone go out and follow Simon and listen to Hightown Pirates, and if you love it, then we'll come and do a part 2, and we'll get some more awesome